All right, so here's an overview of Chapter 1, Section 1. What is statistics? So this section is going to be a lot of vocabulary. We're going to use Google Sheets to start to organize this stuff. You can either do it on a Google Doc where you want to collect your notes, you can write it out, or what I'm going to recommend is doing Google Sheets because then you can access it and you can also sort it alphabetically. So if you're looking for a word, it would be easier to find it. So you can read the slides. I'm going to quickly just kind of go over everything. First of all, the definition of statistics is the study of how to collect, organize, analyze, and interpret data. What's kind of cool is that this entire class is surrounded in this progression. We're going to start off the first couple chapters of how do you go about collecting information, what do you do after you've collected it, what process did you take, how did you go about organizing it, how can you display it once you have the data organized, how can you analyze it and start to really understand what the numbers mean. And then once you begin to have an understanding, you can start to make conjectures and conclusions about the data and really interpret it. Unique thing about statistics, it allows us to take small collections of people or items and make inferences about a larger collection of people or items. This is a really powerful subject because I could technically talk to 20 people and say it applies to thousands. There is no rule in statistics saying that you have to have a certain number of people in order to call it a sample. I can talk to 2 people and say that every high school student believes this because of a sample that I took and it was just 2 people. Now it's a very weak study, but it's still possible. Within studies and surveys, you have individuals, that's the who that's included in the study, and then the variable is the what. So example, if we want to do a study about yards rushed by all running backs in the NFL, the who in this case are all the running backs, and the what is the amount of yards rushed. So just in that little statement, we have both an individual and a variable. Different types of variables, we can have qualitative variables and we can have quantitative variables. Qualitative variables are descriptive. Usually they're a range. So if I wanted to know how old is the average high school student, and I said that they're between 14 and 18 years old, that is a description of where the average age would be found. If I said the average age was 16.2 years, that is quantitative, that's more numerical. You're not saying that every high schooler is 16.2 years old, but that is the average age, whereas if it's between 14 and 18, I'm describing where it would be found. Oops, sorry, things got a little out of order. The next slide talks about population versus sample data. So population is data from every individual of interest, whereas the sample data is data from the part of a population. 2 different types of statistics we'll be working with. First, we have descriptive statistics. It's a kind of analysis we use when we want to describe the population we're studying. So surveys, observations, experiments, graphs, charts, all those can describe the population. But if we're just using a small sample, we want to use inferential statistics. That's generalizing to a broader population group used to make inferences from our data to more general conditions. So for example, if we were just to talk to the people in this stats class, then I would have to use inferential statistics if I want to apply it to all stats classes. If I surveyed both statistics classes, I can then describe what's going on. And then the last slide is what we call our levels of measurement. So when we collect information, there are certain levels of measurement. Starting up here with nominal, that is going to be the weakest or the lowest level of measurement. Then we're going to go to ordinal, interval, and then ratio is going to be the strongest levels of measurement. A little trick to help remember this, for those that have ever studied French, the word noir, N-O-I-R, is the word for black. So noir is the order or the levels of measurement. So nominal, that's when what we've collected are just categories, labels, names. Like I said, it's the lowest level of measurement. Examples of these would be like names of banks, ID numbers, political party. If I said we have Republican, Democrat, Independent, I did not just put that in a specific order, I just listed the 3 political parties. If I said Independent, Republican, Democrat, again, I'm not saying that one is better than the other, I'm just stating what they are. Now, ordinal gets a little more exact. You have categories, but they now have an order, but the differences have no meaning. such as school ranking. If you're 5th and someone else is 10th, you're not twice as smart as 10th. And then if you were to rank the fear of a crime, being very afraid, afraid, not afraid, clearly there is a difference between being very afraid and not afraid. But what is the numerical measurement to get from very afraid to not afraid? That doesn't exist. So I know there's a progression, but I don't know exactly the difference. The next level is interval. There is an order and the differences are meaningful, but there's no starting point. So something like the concept of time. There is no start or end to time, but you know that if it is 1 hour later or 5 hours later, you know exactly how many hours, minutes, seconds that is. So the difference between 1 hour and 5 hours is important, but you can go all the way back in time as far as you'd like, and there is no start to it. Temperature is the same thing. If you're at 0 degrees, that doesn't end your temperature scale. You can go to -1, -2, -3. You can keep going. Now, the Kelvin scale is the exception here because that does stop at 0. And then the last level of measurement is ratio. That has a true starting point. 0 equals 0. And it also makes sense to say you're twice as large. So money, distance, height, length of a fish, anything where you're really measuring and you have a starting point to something, then it would be ratio.